The Hired Gut by Sunfried from the HFY subreddit. One of the three motionless metric machines, all identically shaped like an expressionist parody of a human, emulated a human-like voice that my brain could not accept as human. It wouldn't let me believe it could come from a set of lips. It felt wrong, but I'm used to it. Your performance in battle was 22% less efficient than your previous average. Okay. Are you going to say it doesn't mean anything to you? You don't listen when I do say it. We're always listening. I said it to you as an elliptical way of telling you not to tell me that anymore. I'll try to hint less in the future and be more direct. We understand. And there was a little sound that meant a revision was coming. We think we understand. Long ago, my people conceived of a guided missile steered by a trained pigeon inside. It tapped on controls based on its view of an enemy aircraft, steering towards an intercept. Did it ever fly? I don't know. But they took a creature with a couple of grams of brain that was hardwired to be an expert flyer and put it in charge of a flying thing which had no brain of its own. It's an inspired idea. At least I thought so until I was asked to be the pigeon. At 84 minutes into the battle, you announced to our command staff that the Spinward Solodian fleet's ascent towards the moon was a diversion or a feint. How did you come to this conclusion? As usual, it's hard to describe. It wasn't a decision I knowingly made. Explain how you made the decision without knowing you made it. Oh, sure, I paused the questioning with a signal and assumed my thinking pose in case they thought I was stalling. Just because the question stopped didn't mean they weren't watching. I replayed the battle log from plus 80 minutes, always from my perspective, listening to my gut in hopes of feeling an echo of that past instinct. The Spinward battle group began thrusting upwards towards the moon and, effectively, away from our battle group. They turned a vulnerable side towards us, and I felt a twist in my gut that said this makes no sense. The trailing battle group of the enemy had been spreading half an orbit. No energy changes, just a variety of orbits. Some more polar than equatorial even. I had left the computer alone, but I pictured the orbits diverging, then converging in my mind. Whatever the Spinward group did, they'd almost be out of the battle at the time the trailing fleet converged. Where would we be? The maneuver was a deliberate act by the Spinward fleet, while the trailing fleet looked haphazard and disarrayed. We concluded that was a sign of inadequate command or poor ship handling. Or a maneuver intended to emulate that. The Solodian fleet had never looked that bad before, not in half a decade. My instincts made me tentatively fearful, and suddenly made me distrust what they appeared to be doing. I stopped believing they were in disarray, and I had to ponder what they were doing as if it was intentional. An instinctive abstraction. I can't even call it an abstraction. I felt certain things were not as they appeared. The Mets, don't have instincts. They've got one very complex, intelligent brain, but they can't make a gut call. Endowed by their extinct alien creators with a vast artificial intelligence of self-awareness, they might have been unstoppable if they weren't. So damn empirical. Anything that can be measured must be measured, weighted, and assessed before any choice can be made. And now, the human-built AIs which guide our ships have outclassed them because we gave them the ability to gut it out. And they have made me obsolete as a tactician, fighting battles in the blink of an eye, while the humans aboard are still catching on to the idea of praying to make it through. I was obsolete to a human fleet, but not for everyone. There are other tiers of spacefaring groups that can use my talents. I'm a consultant, I suppose, but my main job is to think, act like myself while they measure. The Spinward fleet was open to attack while climbing, so it appeared. The climb out had no apparent tactical purpose on its own, so either it was an incompetent act or it was a calculated purpose. I think they tried to sell us on a panicking commander. Sell? A calculated psychological manipulation? I read distaste into that pause, but honestly, they can't muster the feeling. No instinct, no moral feeling of valence, just a set of rules and principles to be executed perfectly. It sounds so sordid when you put it like that. Yes, a feint. As I said, it might be. The old saying from my homeworld is that you should never interrupt your opponent when he's making a mistake. And I've seen some capital mistakes in battle, believe me, and made a few myself. But this was an organized maneuver that served no apparent tactical purpose. Oh hell, I knew I'd set them off on a data dump. Yep, we calculated 71 possible tactics which could explain the maneuver. Our plan was to attack the rising fleet by climbing after them. Screens began scrolling with tactical options, sketches of tactics that appeared to fit. 71? Which one was correct? None of them. So 71 useless guesses. They were all similarly flawed. So which would you have chosen to execute? Plan 12. I watched a simulation play out as our fleet climbed away from the planet, engaging ascending Spinward fleet while the trailing fleet gave chase out of weapons range. The Spinward fleet took a heavy beating, right up until the hidden reserve fleet emerged and devastated our fleet. My own command ship was destroyed, I noted. That would expose our vulnerable side to the trailing fleet, not to mention sacrificing our kinetic energy. It would also signal them that we will follow them reactively, and we don't want to surrender control like that. If we make a defensive move each time, they make a move. We are reactive, and they are in control. We must observe our situation on its own merits and in relation to our goals and abilities and act on that. Anyway, I'm scrolling through these, and Plan 12 looks a lot like all the other plans. The differences are subtle for a human. How did you choose 12 over the others? The fewest projected losses. Fewest by what margin? Compared to the plan with the most losses? Less than 0.5%. A Met can't make inconsequential choices very well. Ask one to pick up a pen and give them a choice of a red pen and a blue pen, they get stuck. Internally making lists of merits and demerits of a red versus blue pen. What's the merit of red versus blue? I don't know at all. But I picked the pen that grabs me, and that's how I know something inside me made the decision in a flash, based on rules I can't identify, but it doesn't bother me. The consequences are nearly the same. You like to find the differences to help you reason, but a lot of differences don't matter. A lot of possible outcomes are interchangeable. Usually a pen is a pen, and in this case, equally bad. You could not detect or observe the reserve fleet keeping station behind the moon. Right, but I could be afraid that it could have existed. It was a blind spot. The trailing fleet converges, and their climbing fleet turns around while the reserve fleet emerges. I could envision a pincer in which one fleet, or the others, had a vulnerable side. Never fight a three-front battle if you can help it. That's why we should have defeated the Spinward fleet in its climb and eliminated the threat. You too didn't detect the reserve fleet. The difference is that I guessed it might be there. I tried to think of anything that would make them secure enough in their hearts, in their guts, to turn their vulnerable tails towards us. I put myself in their shoes. Shit. Again. I've got to watch the idioms. The Solodians do not wear shoes. They have, I imagine standing where they're standing, in their place, in command of their fleet. What made me do something would appear foolish, because I believe they tried to put themselves in my to view their perspective on the battle. It's the intelligent abstraction to do. Their climb would have been suicidal had we attacked and they were alone to defend themselves. But they had to feel safe and secure in some knowledge that they have that I don't. They appeared unsafe, but they knew they were safe. They knew they could be rescued from our attack. They had created a lure of a vulnerable fleet, but that lure comes with the snare. The reserve fleet was the snare. That and the trailing fleet blocking us from below, if they were competent, in fact. I felt a little gut twinge and a lick of sweat. Once the chasing and the other nonsense had turned to fighting, they were more competent than I acknowledged at first, and in retrospect, we were closer to fucked than I knew at the time. Didn't want to end my career like this as someone's dirty little secret, but if I have to, I don't want it to get me killed. The humans wanted the Mets in their corner for the usual reasons: manufacturing, labor, shared planets with strategic value. The Mets' response was to make what must have been the challenging request for them to make: teach us instinct. Was the trailing fleet competent or not competent? They were competent in battle, hence my 22% reduced efficiency when we started our attack on the trailing fleet. Our losses show this, so I concluded tentatively that they were competent in navigation. And so the Spinward and reserve fleets above us would not fire towards us in the planet and retired from battle. The Mets peered at me in such a way that I knew this was a question or a prompt. I obliged. Yes, my gut, my instinct, tells me they were too far apart to organize a proper reaction to us failing to follow them, but I hadn't run the numbers yet. Your gut was likely correct. 473 outcomes calculated indicate a disorganized response at best. And one more thing, we really devastated their trailing fleet. Maybe they couldn't stomach the losses. Stomach losses? They are simultaneously envious of my gut, my instinct, my cryptic second brain, which influences all I do without letting me understand why, and repulsed by the idea of it. They are trying to reverse engineer it, create their own gut brains to augment their machine brains, but they They won't say they fear its influence, but they're unwilling to risk the influence of the unknowable. It's not totally unknowable, though. It can be trained, and sometimes even overridden, at least in me. But it's how we survive before we thought of how to survive. It acts without thinking because thinking is a luxury. But they are not big on leaps of faith. They haven't developed faith yet. They felt they had lost too much to continue fighting. But I'm speculating. It was an expensive failure on their part, and their losses were huge. They should have had more fail-safe plan. They didn't seem to plan for us not taking the bait. Why is that? I raised my eyebrow. What have you learned, Metric? They believed we could not resist the lure. They have made a strategic mistake because they did not believe we can act on instinct. If they had feelings, I believe they would feel insulted, but they don't. So they don't. Either they haven't figured it out, that you've hired some instincts, or I have more of a metric mind than I realized. You're not a metric. Why try? They don't get jokes. Yet. Thank you for listening. This again is the story The Hired Gut by Sunfried from the HFY subreddit. Catch you next time.